Yeah, if you call into the association, they have people that are putting people in the 11:30 class.
Okay, perfect. So you guys can call them and try to get put into the 11:30 class so that you can hear what they have to say on the association level for sure. Okay, we are pretty much live. Good morning, good morning, good morning, everybody. Hope you all had a fantastic weekend. Um, I will not be here next week, so we'll probably be skipping out on Monday Mortgage Minute next week. But for today, we're going to briefly go over just really, there's not much news that came out last week besides inflation, and then we'll jump into the NAR settlement. You know what you guys. I also want to hear from a few of you guys what you all think. If this is something that you are nervous about or not. I'm going to tell you offhand. I'm not nervous about it at all. I'm not worried when it comes to it because, and we'll jump into it. But first off, consumer price index came out last week showing inflation increased 0.4% from January to February, coming in at what was expected. It rose from 3.1% to 3.25% year over year. So a bit of a step back when we're talking about inflation. Core CPI, which strips out food and energy, fell from 3.9% to 3.8% year over year. To put into perspective, though, the peak it was in 2022 where CPI was at 9.1% and core CPI was at 6.6%. So we have definitely come a long way. And because inflation's on a rolling 12-month schedule, I believe that as we continue to go through this year, we're going to continue to see inflation come down because at this point now we're basically basing our estimates off of last year, right? It's not about what happened 2, 3, 4 years ago. PPI is what really hurt us. So PPI is Producer Price Index. It measures inflation on the wholesale level. It increased by 0.6% month over month, which was more than double the expectations, and is currently at 1.6%. Like I mentioned, well above what was expected. Mortgage apps did show purchases increase by 5% last week, and they're currently down still 11% year over year. So the first reading that we did of this in January showed us that, and to start the year, mortgage apps were up about 20%. We've seen that come down. Well, purchases were up about 20% year over year. We've seen that come down a lot, especially getting into spring where you are typically see the mortgage apps start to increase as people are starting to look to purchase in the summer. People already have their tax return money starting in the spring and things like that. So Q2 was originally the point of where I said the Fed would start lowering their Fed funds rate. I still believe that. I think they have a meeting in April and one in May. I still think in May is when they're going to start cutting little by little because remember they go by the PCE, personal consumption expenditure, not necessarily CPI or PPI. Last week, Florida Housing did confirm that they're going to have another $100 million for Hometown Heroes in July. Not a surprise. You guys know I've been saying it. This is something that is put into law. So every single July, it's going to renew no matter what to $100 million for first-time home buyers. So until that law is changed, every single July, we know that Hometown Heroes will be coming out with the $100 million. From now till then, there are other options. Okay. Florida Bond, like I always say, is very, very similar to Hometown Heroes. The difference is they don't give as much money. They give $10,000, but the process is relatively the same. It's from the same people that do Hometown Heroes, Florida Housing. The only difference is they look at household income as opposed to application income or 1003 income. So if you have an 18-year-old or a 19-year-old that lives in your house that is your dependent, right, they're going to account for that person's income as well. They'll ask for those tax returns and things like that. Their income limits are slightly lower, but their income limits increase every single May. So in about 2 months, we'll also see income limits for Florida Bond increase. And right now, I think for a 1 to 2 person in Broward, I think it's like at 100,000, like 102, 103. So that will probably increase in May as well. So to jump into it, NAR, the big news from last week that got everybody a little bit nervous and scared. Some people are going to continue doing business the way that they have. I've spoke to a few listing agents, agents that get listings, and they have the same sentiment where it's like talking to the seller, do you want to sell your home for the highest and best price you possibly can, and get the most amount of money, right? If you do, we're going to need to be able to market this correctly. We're going to need to be willing to give a buyer's agent a commission if they bring a buyer, right? Those conversations within a few of the listing agents I had, they pretty much have the same sentiment. Now, obviously, play devil's advocate here, right? Just because looking at both sides, right? It also could be because it's fresh and it's like, of course, I'm going to give the buyer side commission, right? But let's say 2, 3, 4 years down the line, where everything has really switched over, right? The way that people are doing business does switches over because you're not technically able to now disclose that buyer broker or the buyer broker comp on the MLS, right? You're not allowed to do that, and so it could be in a couple years where that does become a new norm, where buyers, buyer broker comp is not a thing when you're looking at putting up a listing or anything like that, even if it's going to be disclosed outside of the MLS. Okay. So that's the number one thing when it comes to the NAR settlement is it will no longer be disclosed on the MLS if you're able to get commission or not as a buyer's agent. So you have to automatically, when you're sitting down with your buyer, right? And a lot of people have not done this in the past, and if they did, they never filled out that specific spot in that broker and that buyer broker agreement where it basically stated that if there's this minimum amount for your services that would need to be paid. Now is when you're going to have to start having those conversations, right? Where you're having that buyer broker agreement filled out and saying, this is what I'm doing for you as a buyer, right? The thing is that it sounds like it's very easy to be able to purchase your own home. And once you get under the process, there's a bunch of things that you don't know about that could put you at default. And at the end of the day, the listing agent is going to be looking out for one person, and that's the seller, because they're not going to be getting paid the commission for you. That's not the case. They're getting paid one flat commission on the listing agent's end, or on the seller's end, right? The other part of that commission would be essentially either null and void, meaning that there is no other commission on the buyer side if you decide to move on by yourself, or we try to negotiate it with the seller, because at the end of the day, you need protection for yourself as well, right? And so that's the conversations that will be starting to be had, which may be a little bit uncomfortable for a beginning realtor, which is why I believe that this will filter out newer agents that don't know how to have this conversation, new people that are trying to get into the business that think they can make easy money. But I think that it's going to keep the experienced people, the experienced agents that know how to negotiate, that know how to have conversations, still being able to do buyer side deals, right? Me personally, right? If I was still on the real estate side, honestly, I would take the risk of basically putting on that buyer broker agreement of if I put a number, and this is just me, I wouldn't suggest this for anybody, right? But if there is a specific number that you want to put on there, I would put probably something relatively low, because my goal is to basically tell the buyer, look, we're going to get it from the seller, right? I'm bringing the buyer. We're going to get it from the seller. Ultimately, you need to make sure that you're protected. It's like having a lawyer on retainer, right? But we're going to make sure that we get it from the seller. So in order to build that confidence, right, we're going to put a that you owe me based off of a flat fee or something like that, because ultimately the goal is going to be able to get it from the seller, and we will get it from the seller, because knowing our local market now, with people paying 5-6% on commissions and giving seller credit still, right? There's experts that say that they believe that this is going to help housing costs come down. I do not see that. I think that people naturally are greedy, and if they think that their home is worth X amount, they're going to want to sell it for X amount. They're not going to say, yeah, I'm going to take a discount because I don't have to pay 3% extra on a $400,000, $500,000 purchase. So I'm saving $15,000. As you're seeing it now, where people are selling at 6% at $500,000 and still giving an extra $10,000 back at closing, right? So I don't see that happening. at least in the near future, but we don't know. We don't know how, right, the consumer is actually really going to adjust if they're going to play hardball. But ultimately, the people that don't want to pay commissions are usually for sale by owners. We see it now, right? I don't want to pay commission. I want to sell my house by myself. It's we're seeing we already kind of have that, right? And then you have to negotiate on the buyer side with them to basically say, I have the buyer, blah, blah, blah. I don't think it's going to be any different. What's going to be the hard thing is being able to protect yourself up front as a buyer's agent in case the seller does not want to give you commission, right? You either have to chalk it up as a loss, basically, right? A business loss, or you take it from the buyer, right? It really just depends. I mean, ultimately, a lot of the people that I deal with are first time home buyers, and they need agents. Like this is not, it's not something I always tell, even if you know where the property that you're getting, you know the person you're buying from, you need an agent to be able to facilitate that transaction because it's not easy. I had one say last month. Last month a gift of equity deal. The seller was aunt, the buyer was niece, right? And there's so many things that happen throughout the transaction that the realtor has to facilitate, right? The property, because it was a gift of equity, hadn't been really updated within a long period of time. So that appraisal came in subject to what is the seller going to do at that point, right? Who does the seller contact, right? That's on the listing agent side. On the buyer side, right? If the same agent wasn't controlling both the buyer and the seller, and it was two different people on another transaction, the buyer, what am I supposed to do with this appraisal? What does this mean, right? What are these questions that I have? My inspection says that I'm missing 20 outlets in the house, and it's going to cost me $5,000, right? There's a lot of questions that they have and a lot of curiosity. So being able to kind of sit down with them and say, I'm going to take you from A to Z, right? Is going to be able to help them. Ultimately, as well, I think it opens up a new bag of tricks for buyers agents too. Now they may be looking at doing credit repair. They may be looking at getting their loan officer license, right? To be able to hang it so that way, if they're showing people a property, if they're showing buyers a property, and worst case scenario, they're not able to be able to get commission, well, at least they'll be able to get money off of, doing the loan, right? And they're able to have both licenses active. I see that being a part of it too, depending on the agent, depending on, what they kind of want to do. But other than that, I really don't see it, at least in the local market, right? Maybe nationally it's a bigger thing, which is why I want to kind of talk to people outside of Florida, outside of South Florida, because we are in our own bubble and it seems like it's a really big deal outside of this. And I look at it and I don't see how it changes too much, besides the harder conversations that the buyer's agent is going to have up front. And they are going to be buyers. They're going to try to get the deal done by themselves. And they're going to learn very quickly that that buying a home is not a commodity. It's not like you're going to, Walmart instead of Target to buy milk. It's not like that, right? It's not sold everywhere. And so because of that, I think that there's going to be some people that are going to try it and not going to be able to accomplish it and won't have that roadmap. So as long as you guys know what your value is, right, which is probably what you would have to start working on if you already have not, what your value proposition is to a buyer, what you are able to offer them besides being able to look on the MLS for deals for them, and kind of past that would really help you when you're sitting down having these conversations, because now it's going to go into that same thing that when you're going to a seller, you're having that conversation with them. And ultimately, whether you agree with it or not, the sellers make, X amount of money on every single deal. They're the ones that make the most, right? If we have the buyer, we should be able to get compensated for it. I agree. And I think that you will be compensated if you bring the buyer. But I do think this also turns into a buyer's market. To be honest with you, I think it's going to turn into a buyer's market, because if you have sellers that now are basically not wanting to or not willing to pay the other half because of this news or something like that, right? The buyer's going to have a little bit more flexibility on on negotiating too as well, even if they do come with an agent or not. I think more people shift over to the listing side, right? Agents, you have more stuff coming on the market. But even right now, where you have buyers being represented by agents, there's times where, buyers are still getting everything that they want, like I mentioned, when it comes to credits and things like that. So I think this slowly shifts over into a buyer's market. That's just my opinion. Because I think now buyers will have the upper hand, whether they're with an agent or not, to be able to negotiate, because it makes it a little bit harder for the seller to sell. Does anybody have like any input, what they believe? I kind of want to have an open discussion here. I know I'm not the only one with an opinion. I want to know, if you are nervous, why? What you think about this news and stuff like that. Yeah, go ahead, Marlene.
Okay, so I'm not nervous, but I wanted to know if Fannie Mae or any one of these lending institutions, are they planning to do any where we not seller, but where we finance any of that real estate commission?
So you can't. I'm going to tell you why. This is directly with the CFPB, right? Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. We cannot do anything to finance that buyer's agent commission into the loan, right? Because ultimately lenders have a 3% fee that they need to abide by. Okay. And that 3% fee, especially right now with no liquidity in the market, will typically go to rates or go to the origination fees that the lender has, right? You're not able to finance non-lender fees into that part of the loan, and that's where it becomes a little bit tricky. Because if the lender is only allowed to have 3% to be able to charge to the buyer, it's definitely not going to go to the buyer's agent. And even then, like I mentioned, that's something that is above everybody and would have to come down directly from the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau to switch what they call a qualified mortgage, right? That would be where it has to come down from. Nikki, you had a question?
I did, Mike. So, and you can clarify this. Isn't it true that in order for a buyer to obtain a loan, they need some sort of representation? If they don't already have their real estate license, they need either a realtor to represent them and or a lawyer in order to
No,
obtain a loan. That's not true.
no,
I was
not
told
to get
that.
a,
Loan
not to get a
officers
mortgage loan.
told me. Say that one more time.
You're talking about specifically to get a loan?
So basically, if they are financing the purchase of their home, they can't do it by themselves. Don't they need a lawyer? I mean, like either a lawyer or an agent, unless they have like their real estate license or some sort of background in real estate. I don't think they can I don't think they can finance their property on their own. I had a conversation with a loan officer. That's what he was telling me. That's why I'm like, let me clarify with you. But he did tell me that he was like, a buyer, if they are looking to obtain a property through financing, they have to have some sort of representation.
Not necessarily. And not on that, not on purchasing, because I've had a bunch of deals throughout the years where there's no buyer's agent, and the client basically goes through us to help them throughout the process, and there's no buyer's agent at all. There's only a seller's agent, and that's it. And the
So not even an
representation,
attorney?
not even an attorney. No.
The title company represents that attorney end of it.
Okay.
Yeah, kind of like
So maybe
they're
the
paying
title company is the
something,
one that covers it, but ultimately that's
possibly.
going to be this. That won't change anything because there's going to be title companies in
Of
the
course, in the
transaction no matter.
transaction regardless.
Mhm.
Okay, I was just trying to clear that up because, you hear all these different things. Of course, you're
Yeah,
gonna hear some new things now.
yeah,
Mhm.
no, for sure. I mean, it could be both of them could be right. They do need representation, but the title company is the one that satisfies that already on the deals either way.
Right.
What's up, Dr. Carla?
For VA buyers,
I was going to get to
they
this.
can't. If they can't pay the commission and the
Exactly.
sellers refuse, like
Yep.
who's gonna take on VA clients?
Mm-hmm. That's true. The ones that are going to suffer the most are going to be VA clients because the VA does not allow a veteran to pay any sort of agent commissions at all. And in the past, there wasn't an issue. So I think the VA clients are the ones that suffer the most because on that buyer broker agreement, you basically have to take a gamble and put it at zero and basically put that they don't owe you any commission and take that VA buyer around or don't take the client at all, right? It really just depends on your business model. I think that that's going to be something that gets developed over time, right? When you're running a business, you're going to have to see which ones are really like out of all of your clients that you've had over the past year, 2 years, right? Once this goes into effect in mid-July, how many of them did you really not get any sort of any seller to be able to pay the commission on? If it's none of them, at that point, you understand where your essentially where your batting average is, right? And so you're able to now be a little bit looser on your buyer broker agreements because you know based off of your averages in the past that you're gonna most likely get compensated no matter what. And you run the risk of not doing it, and that's on the flip side, right? Which could also hurt you. But that's really the only thing. That buyer broker agreement up front, I think is gonna be the biggest key to see how many clients you start bringing in and really start to work with. And even though it goes into effect in mid-July, I would suggest trying to start doing that now to get that practice in and see who's willing to, because you don't know if somebody starts now, if they're even gonna close before July, right? So you might as well start working those buyer broker agreements now, just in case they don't. But yes, VA clients will not be able to pay any commissions, so they're either gonna be solo or sellers are gonna have to fork something over on that end, which I believe they will. I mean, you're getting credits either way. All right, Vina, you had a question? Who does the contracts if the client doesn't have a buyer's agent? This is where they have no representation, right? The listing agent will draw up the contract. All right, I have a bunch of offers, we'll take yours, and you have to come in at, X amount over appraised value and all this stuff, and the client doesn't know their numbers, right? So they just say yes, 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 and you're gonna have that issue as well. Right? They don't know where the property is going to appraise for, how much money they're spending on it, how much more money they're spending on it, right? Stuff like that. Buyers are gonna need representation. That's why I'm telling you guys, I'm not extremely worried because you're gonna see, right, over time, hey, I bought a house, I did it without an agent and it was the worst experience I possibly could have. I probably should have had representation because the listing agent did XYZ and forced me to, purchase because they put the inspection period within 2 days, they put the financing period in, within 1 week. The mortgage company I was working with didn't pay attention to that on the contract, right? All of this stuff. And so over time, you're gonna hear people really be put into sticky situations and gonna need to protect themselves. And these are also conversations you should be having with your client, right? You don't want the listing agent to make up the contract, so you don't know what they're gonna put as your inspection period, as your financing period. You don't know what any of these things mean. These are things that protect you as a buyer. If you find something out after the inspection period, right, you won't be able to back out without getting a loan denial. Right? If your loan denial does, or if your loan approval doesn't come in on time, you're essentially gonna be shit out of luck. You lose, the seller can easily take your deposit. All right, what are my services worth if I'm able to keep you, make sure that you are keeping your $5,000 in escrow, right?
Well,
60% of the
sorry, but listing agents also have a fiduciary to the buyers. So I wouldn't say they're all thieves and
No,
they're gonna
no,
drive.
no, I'm not putting listing agents into one bucket. Obviously, you're gonna have listing agents that are normal people, right? We're all human beings. We understand both sides, but we also have listing agents, and I've dealt with it even with a buyer's agent on my side, where the listing agent will try to take that deposit no matter what, even though we have everything that we need to be able to back out of the contract. We've seen it a lot with condos recently. Right, the listing agents want to protect themselves from the seller because they're accepting an offer that is not financeable, And this guy did the same mistake. This listing agent did the same mistake 2 or 3 times, and then he tried to blame us, telling us that he told us things that he really did not disclose to us. And to try to save face with the seller was basically trying to fight for the buyer's deposit. And you can see that if a buyer is not being represented, how easily that could have gone south. So no, I don't think it happens across the board. I don't think it's going to be everybody, but it will end up happening more often than it does now. Thank you, Jennifer. 'Cause you're inputting a lot of different things here. I don't know if you have like an opinion on this, that you want to weigh in with everybody.
I just want to say I've had my license for a very long time. I haven't sold as much real estate as I would love to. But I've seen this happen before where they pivoted to this type of agency. Do you remember the time when we had buyer's agency and a listing agent, in order to represent a buyer, they would have to transition to become a transaction agent. But now automatically we are all transaction agents once you do a contract, correct? Yes. So this is going to change too. It's going to change again. Everybody will be compensated. You'll have enough commissions in there for everybody to get something. It's for the listing agent to go to bat for the buyer's agent. Have the conversation with your seller that, you're going to have better exposure and a quicker sale if there is something in there for a buyer's agent.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't that?
I definitely agree with Jennifer. I feel like it's really going to be on the listing agent to really show the value of what it is to actually compensate a buyer's agent. Because even now, I've seen it where, yes, they are inputting lower commissions in the MLS. And, sometimes those homes are sitting, because when you think about what our work really equates to, some buyer's agents are not going to even want to present these properties to their clients, and so a listing agent knows what it takes to get a good buyer to come to their property. They know what it takes. And, I feel like that 3% or 2.5%, whatever that you're giving that buyer's agent, that's that buyer's agent's finder's fee, period. So I think that it's going to be really on the listing agent to educate their sellers and understand why this even is in place. And because the sellers are going to become buyers. Once you sell your home, you're going to become a buyer. So it's going to go back, they're going to be able to feel both sides of it. So I just think that we'll all get compensated. It's just about how you really do present your value proposition to these people. And even though the commissions will no longer be presented on the MLS, agents are going to put them in the broker remarks. You know what I'm saying? I don't think they're going to hide it completely, because, again, this is our business. We understand what motivates our business. People got to get paid, and I just don't think there's going to be much of a difference, really. I just think that newer agents may struggle with that confidence piece of really presenting their value, because they have to figure out what that is and how to have that tough conversation. So I do think we are going to see a decrease in how many new agents come into the business and how much, a lot of people are going to run. People are scared. So I do think we'll see that shift. But as far as compensation, I do think strong agents will get paid.
I agree. And that's the thing that we keep saying. I don't think it's gonna affect us too much on the local level. I think it really is that buyer's agent agreement, right? How are you going to structure that in your business up front? Because that's what'll scare buyers, right? Which is why I said that I would do it. I would essentially not worry about that, right? I would take the risk. If I were to charge the buyer, how much would it be? Probably not that much. Because I know that on the other side I'll be negotiating for them, and making sure that I'm compensated for bringing the buyer too. But ultimately, you do have to have these conversations now more upfront, of, hey, if we're not able to, this is what you would owe me. And that's where it gets a little bit, where you run that risk where, because you're most likely almost going to be guaranteed to get that commission. But what if the seller ends up saying no, right? And the buyer ends up purchasing within that home, and now the buyer owes you X amount of money, right? That may not leave such a good taste in their mouth too. So I think it's more so that piece of it, how to overcome that, what conversations are you gonna have with the buyer to set those proper expectations. Honestly, I do agree that it's not gonna change too much. Like I mentioned, when we first started, right? The seller, going to the seller, do you want to sell your home for the highest and best possible price as quickly as you possibly can, right? That's really what the conversation is with the seller. But now it's a different conversation with the buyer. And I think that's the biggest disconnect there.
Yeah, I agree, but it's really about, I think it boils down to the agent and selling their value, but it's going to change some things. It's going to change some things as far as agents are concerned, like how they communicate. But I think that's a good thing. I think that'll be a good thing.
I think it is going to be a good thing. It's definitely going to flush out a lot of people. And the cream will rise to the top. Always what we've said in the past, and what I firmly believe. Deals are going to get done. Buyers agents are still going to get compensated. There's going to be a way where it gets disclosed on the MLS without violating MLS rules. Maybe with a simple, seller is willing to compensate buyer's agent, something like that, without a specific number. So at least, the agents know who to call, who not to call, and things like that. But I agree with Dr. Carla too, in the sense that it is a fine line, because you don't want to ultimately not show a property that could be perfect for your client, either, not knowing if you're going to get compensated or not.
Absolutely, because we still have a job to do, but again, that's where that conversation comes up, because it's either going to be a conversation with your buyer and or even the seller's agent, like, look, my buyer's highly qualified. Is there anything that we can do? The same way we have those tough conversations about concessions, on top of commissions. So
yeah, we're still getting 6% commissions splits, and on top of that, seller credits too within the property. So it's not. I don't think that the sellers are going to. The sellers that are not okay with paying commission, whether that be 3% or 6%, are the for sale by owners that we all know of now today in this market. That's no different. The owners that understand the value of what the agent's going to bring to them on the listing and on the buying side are going to be okay with paying those. All right, y'all. I mean, it is 10:38, pretty much 10:40. Been going for about 35, 40 minutes. Call the MLS, see if you can get added to that 11:30 a.m. meeting. It'll probably be really, really good. And you can hear it directly from the Miami Association of Realtors, what they're thinking, what they believe, how this is going to change. They're probably going to just speak to you more so about what happens from here as opposed to opinions. But let me know how it is.
Mike, do you have a link to that you can share?
I sent it an email earlier today. Let me try to get it for you here. You have to call them directly. Where is it? I had it up too. There it is. So just call them, because I don't think it allows you to do it online, but they are registering people to the Zoom, and they'll send you a confirmation. All right. Thank you all for coming. No problem. I won't be here next week. I'm going out of town. I'll be back on Wednesday, so we will reconvene in 2 weeks. Thank you all. Have a good one.
All right, thanks.